let us discuss the measurement of variables. In business, mm, we measure variables. Variables include uh, frequently measured concepts like customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, job satisfaction, employee's intention to leave the job, and so on. So, in marketing, management, HR, strategy, and other business related fields, we measure variables by using surveys. But there are two types of sciences. One is the natural science, which includes fields like physics, chemistry, which is known for its precise definitions. For example, a pound, kilogram, a kilometer, a ton. So, all these are very, very precise measures that are used in natural sciences. But unfortunately, in social sciences like human resources, marketing, management, the definitions are imprecise and there are no uniform measures. Like all over the world in natural science, people can understand kilograms, pounds, meters, and so on. But there is no globally accepted measures for concepts that are used in social sciences, like, for example, charitable donation intentions, purchase intentions, customer satisfaction, customer happiness, service quality. They don't have universal measures that are commonly agreed upon the entire world. So, social sciences are imprecise than natural science. And in measuring the constructs or the variables in social sciences, we can either use unidimensional constructs or multi-dimensional constructs. For example, to measure customer loyalty, you can ask a customer to respond in a single item scale, like I am loyal to Walmart. So we will ask the customer to select a number between 1 and 7, with 7 being strongly agree that he or she is loyal to Walmart, and 1 indicating strongly disagreeing with I am loyal to Walmart. So this is an example of a unidimensional construct. So we think that just by answering this one question, we can measure a customer loyalty. But multi-dimensional constructs are much better than unidimensional construct. Because instead of just asking one question, if we ask the customer to respond to the 3 questions that you see in this picture, and the customer, we take the average of the 3 scores. So here we think loyalty as being a 3-dimensional construct. So we assume that here loyalty means customer planning to buy from Walmart in the near future, and the customer recommending Walmart to his or her friends, and the customer also using walmart.com website when he or she wants to buy online. So these 3 items capture customer loyalty in a much better way than unidimensional constructs. So even though we use some unidimensional measures to measure some variables in business, most of the business and marketing management related variables are measured by using multidimensional constructs. And then we have to create an average score for all 3 that shows how loyal or how satisfied the customer is with the given store. So there are 4 types of variables that are used in business field. They are called as nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio scales. So nominal scales. So here there is no difference, or there is no numerical difference between 2 options. For example, asking a customer whether he or she is a male or female. So here the customer responses by choosing male or by choosing female. The customer is simply indicating his or her gender, but we don't assume any difference between, like, for example, we don't assume male or female is greater than or lower than each other. Same thing with hair color, brown, black, blonde. So they are just like, for example, even though we use some numbers. To give an example, let us say we ask a customer zip code. So if one customer says my zip code is 54311 and another customer says my zip code is 38111, we cannot perform any subtraction or addition within this zip code numbers. We can only calculate percentages. What percentage of customers are male, what percentage of customers are female. So we can only do percentage wise analysis in nominal scales. In ordinal scales, we can rank the customer in order of importance. For example, in this question that you see, we can ask customers, please rank the most important aspect of service as 1 and the least important as number 4, and based upon this we can rank the different aspects. So asking customers to rank different theme parks, asking customers to rank their preferable travel locations, they all are called as ordinal scales. So next one is the interval scale, where interval scales where most of the constructs, nearly 90% of the variables used in business, marketing and management are interval scales. So you see here customer satisfaction for or the employee satisfaction for a company's benefit package, where the score of 1 indicates that the customer is very unsatisfied and a score of 5 indicates that the employee is highly satisfied. But why do we call this as an interval scale? We call this as an interval scale because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 but no 0. The scale does not have a natural 0. So 0 here is unclear. So practically speaking, this makes no difference. We treat the 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 as just other regular numbers, and we can assume that somebody who has a score of employee satisfaction score of 5 is 5 times more satisfied than somebody who has a score of 1. So other than some very obscure and technical issue, we would consider an interval scale numbers to be a proper number. And finally, the ratio scale. So ratio scale is a numbers based scale that has a natural 0. For example, how many credit cards do you have? There is the answer can be a 0, the answer can be a 5. So ratio scale is a scale that contains a natural 0, whereas interval scale is a scale that does not contain a natural 0. Even though like some studies or some researchers think that the neutral or the third option is 0, comes close to the definition of 0 in an interval scale. And there are binary scales that are used. So binary scales are yes, no type of questions. So there are certain constructs or variables where a yes, no would be applicable. For example, if you want to ask customers, have you been to Florida? A yes or no would be appropriate. But we cannot ask customers, are you satisfied with Walmart? Yes, no. Because what about people who are in between, right? I mean, who are not clear as to whether they are yes or a no. And what about people who are very highly satisfied? So even they can only mark a yes. So binary scales should not be used to measure items that are measured by interval scales like customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, and so on. Binary scale should be only used when a question has a clear-cut yes and no, or a binary situation. So Likert scale, most of the interval scales are Likert scales. So Likert scales contains simply worded statements to which respondents indicate their level of agreement or disagreement on a 5 or 7 point scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So this is an example. How satisfied are you with the retailer Hem and Stitch, with 1 indicating very dissatisfied and 5 indicating satisfied. This is both a Likert scale and also an interval scale. So there are lots of debates about Likert scale, like what does the midpoint 3 indicate. And how many items should we have? 5, 7, 9, 11, and 100. People go up to 100 items. But generally, 7 is an acceptable number and 5 is the next acceptable number. It is very unusual to use 100, but even though some studies use 100 scale point items. And to measure emotions where there is a negative and a positive aspect to an emotion, like for example, unpleasant, messy and clean. So we use a semantic differential scale where a point of 1 indicates healthy, score of 1 indicates healthy, and a score of 5 indicates unhealthy. So this is a semantic differential scale that is used to measure emotions which have both a positive and a negative side. And apart from that, indexes are used to measure concepts like inflation or the stock market index. So these are generally accepted measures of health of the economy or the health of a company and so on. We use indexes. So setting up a survey. So when you are setting up a survey, either in Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, when you are setting it up either online or you are doing a traditional survey in MS Word, taking a printout and distributing it through mail. So these are some of the rules that we need to follow in setting up a survey. We should begin with an introduction about the study. We should identify who is conducting the research, the name of the researcher, the organization which he or she is representing, what are the risks of taking the survey, and are we going to give any type of rewards, and most importantly, we have to guarantee the anonymity and privacy of the respondents, if that is a major point in our research. There are some types of research in which the privacy of the participants does not matter, but again, the researcher has to be the arbitrator of fairness in such instances. Even though the person who participates in the survey might think that he or she doesn't need privacy, the researcher has to take a stand that I'm not going to put my respondent in danger because he or she is answering my survey. I'm not going to put him or her in a problematic situation. Even though he or she wants or thinks it doesn't matter, I shouldn't do that to the respondent. So it should be very, very clear. So all this has to be mentioned in the introduction to the study. And we should not mislead participants. So for example, for certain questions, like for example, if we ask customers, do you think movie theaters tickets are overpriced? So people might answer strategically, thinking that if we say yes, the movie theaters might reduce the prices. So strategic answers on part of customers is a component of surveys. So the researcher has to understand how to cope up or how to meet this challenge where the respondents answer strategically. So there are tools to avoid such strategic answers. Like for example, we don't ask people, do you think the prices are high? So we instead would ask, what do you think is an acceptable price for a movie theater? So by wording the questions properly, we can avoid strategic answering. And always ask the dependent variable first, like customer satisfaction or customer loyalty or employee satisfaction. If these are your dependent variables, ask these questions first, because if we ask other questions, then they might corrupt the customer's mind. For example, if we ask a customer about a service encounter that went bad in a service firm, the customer might think about such an instant, and that might temporarily reduce his or her satisfaction with the firm. So the first thing we should do is, in a survey, better ask the independent variable first, the dependent variable first, the independent variable next, and questions about demographics like age, gender, income, education level last. And if you are giving any incentive to customers, that should be mentioned at the introduction to the study. So survey research is prone to biases. So one such bias is the social desirability bias, where the customer thinks that by answering certain questions, he or she might look less desirable. So he or she avoids providing truthful answers to questions. So for example, if you ask customers, do you download pirated versions of music? I mean, nobody is going to give the right answer. And even if they are downloading it illegally, they might feel bad. They might feel that they are being evaluated or judged by the researcher. So they might provide a socially incorrect response. So one way to identify social desirability bias among customers is to ask a set of questions called as social desirability scale. So there we ask a set of questions that would let us know the customer's tendency to answer in a socially desirable way. And another bias is called a self-selection bias or volunteer bias. So for example, let us say that we are conducting a study on exercising, and then we tell we post the survey in our social media telling people we are conducting a research on exercising. So all of our friends who are highly enthusiastic about exercising will take the survey, and people who don't exercise, they don't care about the survey. So we will do the analysis and find that the audience or the respondents of the survey are highly eager to to exercise, and then we conclude that most of the respondents are doing exercise, which would be incorrect. So to avoid self-selection bias, one way to avoid self-selection bias is to provide a reward. So let us say that if we say that we give $2 for every person who completes the survey, then even people who generally don't exercise, they might still take the survey to get the reward. So this is one way to avoid self-selection bias. And we should avoid biases in setting up the survey. For example, one bias is asking loaded questions. So loaded questions are questions that show the bias of the researcher. Like, so are you going to vote for that incompetent candidate? So if we ask in such a way, even if the respondent is planning to vote for that given candidate, he or she would give a wrong answer, so that he or she would feel that he or she is not antagonizing the researcher. And we should avoid leading questions. So leading question is a set of questions that nudges the respondent to a certain type of response. So we should avoid asking leading questions to the customers by telling them like, this product is eco-friendly, so are you going to choose it? So those type of questions are leading questions which elicit a certain type of responses from the customers. And we should avoid double-barreled questions. So double-barreled questions, so one example is this: do you think it is a good idea for children to study geography and history in primary school? So what if the respondent thinks it is a good idea for children to study history but not geography? So he or she has to say either yes or no to this question. So if you have two questions in one question, it is much better to split them into two questions. Do you think it is a good idea for children to study geography? Should be a separate question. And do you think it is a good idea for children to study history? That should be a separate question. So by rewarding participants, that is a good way to increase the number of respondents and also to avoid the self-selection bias. So in the previous class, we discussed setting up the electronic survey in Qualtrics. So these are some of the rules that we need to remember when we set up such a survey in Qualtrics. So this concludes our discussion for this video.